They thought they were fighting the Taliban, but what they awakened was far older, and it didn't bleed. When 8 US Marines were deployed to the most isolated outpost in Afghanistan, they expected gunfire, not whispers in Russian, radios speaking to no one, and a trench filled with ancient bones. This isn't a ghost story. It's a military report that was never meant to reach the public. And it starts with one simple warning. If you dig anything up, just put it back. It was June 2009, and the war effort in Afghanistan had reached a critical boiling point. NATO and US forces were pushing deeper into Taliban territory. Observation Post Rock, or OP Rock as it was commonly called, was a small, high-risk assignment, tasked with watching enemy movement in a region thick with bloodshed and Taliban activity. The Marines would be rotating in after a British unit, taking over the post for a 60-day stretch. What they didn't realize was that the previous unit couldn't wait to leave. Not because of the enemy they could see, but because of the one they couldn't explain. When the British soldiers vacated OP Rock, their faces were sunken, eyes shadowed with something beyond fatigue. They didn't linger. They didn't brief the incoming Americans on terrain, tactics, or threats as was customary. Instead, one of them, gaunt and trembling despite the heat, gave a final warning that felt more like a curse. If you dig anything up, just put it back. No explanation followed, just those haunting words. Then they were gone. The Marines laughed it off at first. Maybe it was some weird British inside joke. But the ground had different plans. That first night, Corporal Mark Lena stood guard. He was alert, methodical, a straight-edged Marine with little tolerance for superstition. The desert air was still. The stars hung low and watchful, and Lena's only companion in the guard shack was his military-issue radio. The first time the static crackled, he assumed it was just a poor signal. The second time, he heard voices muffled, not in English. The third time, his blood chilled. The words, barely perceptible, sounded Russian. Impossible, he thought. This was a secure, encrypted line. You don't just pick up voices on this frequency unless someone shares your cryptographic access. He pulled the battery, reset the device, and reached out to headquarters. No one was transmitting. No interference, they assured him. No traffic. Lena said nothing more, but the air felt heavier. The following day, Sergeant David Green instructed the men to fortify the trench around the outpost. It was shallow, poorly dug, and offered little protection. The British hadn't done much to improve it, something the Marines had chalked up to laziness. But as the shovels sank into the dry soil, something ancient began to push back. Lance Corporal Zolik was the first to strike metal, an old engineering stake etched with Russian script. Lena nodded. Soviets were here in the 80s, he said. Nothing new. 10 meters away, Wilson hit something else. Clay pots, shards of ceramic, and then the unmistakable curve of a femur bone, long and dry. The kind you only find in tombs. More bones followed. Skulls, ribs, entire skeletons. Dozens. Some with jewelry still clinging to the remains. The trench, it turned out, wasn't just shallow. It was a mass grave. The warning from the British came rushing back. And that night, none of the Marines slept easily. 13 days into the deployment, Lance Corporal James Hoyt took watch. He was the youngest of the group, having just turned 20. As he scanned the horizon through night vision goggles, a scream tore through the night, sharp, human, and close. Hoyt spun around. Nothing. Then movement caught his eye. A man sprinting from one bush to another, 200 meters away. Contact left, he yelled. Lena rushed to the edge of the perimeter, raising his fire weapon equipped with thermal imaging. He scanned. Nothing. No heat signature. No man. Just sand and wind. But unattractive Betty, the dog left behind by the British and adopted by the Marines, barked wildly, refusing to back down. Her eyes locked on the same direction Hoyt had identified. No matter how many times they scanned the area, she remained fixated, growling and pacing. Still, no one came. No harm followed. And yet, it felt like something had arrived. Days passed. Then came day 26. The sun scorched the outpost, the air thick with dust and boredom. Lance Corporal Thomas Zolik, drenched in sweat, stood watch in the same tiny shack that had already begun to feel cursed. Without warning, the temperature plunged. The desert chill came not from the air, but from something else, something internal, something ancient. Then the whispering started. Not on the radio, not from outside, but within the shack, inches from his ears. He turned, fire weapon raised. No one. Footsteps scuttled across the roof above. He raced outside. Empty. The camp was asleep. No movement, no prank, nothing to explain it. Then, through his thermal scope, Zolik spotted something. A man standing upright, fists raised to the sky. No emotion, no movement, just a statue of rage against the pale moonlight. He blinked, looked again, gone. No heat, no trace, just whispers, still in the shack, calling from nowhere and everywhere. Zolik couldn't take it. By morning, he requested a transfer, citing combat stress. He wasn't trying to be a coward, he insisted. He just felt something wrong had attached itself to him, and he couldn't breathe under its weight anymore. The others mocked him until they experienced it too. A few nights later, Corporal Mark Lena saw it, the same figure Hoyt described, standing on a ridge, unmoving, cold on thermal, but vivid through night vision. When he lowered his scope, it vanished. And then he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned. Nothing. The others were all asleep. Unattractive Betty, again, barked relentlessly toward the mountains. Lena's doubt collapsed under the weight of his own encounter. Zolik wasn't weak. He wasn't fleeing duty. He had simply seen what was coming. As the days pressed on, more Marines reported strange occurrences. Smith heard voices whispering his name during watch. Parker swore something tugged at his boot while he slept. Wilson reported hearing static conversations in a language no one could identify. It was no longer a haunting, it was a siege of the mind. The night of day 59 brought the climax of their terror. All radios went silent. Gibbs, their comm specialist, couldn't explain it. The equipment hadn't changed. Batteries were fine, antennas secure, yet the silence was absolute. Then, as if summoned by dread itself, the night erupted into chaos. Fire weapon sounds, heavy and deafening, rained down on OP Rock. The Marines scrambled, taking cover behind barriers and diving into trenches. A combustive weapon whistled through the air. They braced for impact, but no blast followed. The noise was there, the terror tangible, but no damage. No scorched earth. Nothing. As dawn broke, not a single casing was found. Not a shred of proof that any shot had ever been fired. Yet every man had heard it, felt it, smelled the cordite. The fear lingered long after the silence returned. When reinforcements arrived later that morning, the Marines were already packed. Faces hollow, expressions blank. They left OP Rock without looking back. But the rock, it seemed, wasn't finished with them. Within weeks, William Smith, Blake Parker, and Dylan Gibbs were all unalived in separate incidents across Afghanistan. Sergeant David Green suffered life-altering injuries from a blast. The survivors began to believe the warning had been more than folklore. By disturbing the graves beneath OP Rock, they had awoken something. An echo of bloodshed from the past, still angry, still unresolved. History painted a grim backdrop to their experience. OP Rock wasn't just a battlefield. It was a revolving altar of death. During the Soviet invasion, Russian forces had seized the hilltop and unalived Mujahideen fighters who once guarded it. Years later, the Taliban returned the favor, unaliving the Russians in kind. When the Americans arrived, they unalived Taliban forces who had fortified the post. Each regime left their dead behind, bones buried under layers of conflict and sand. What the Marines uncovered in their trench wasn't just bone. It was resentment, sorrow, rage, a battleground that never stopped echoing. Corporal Mark Lena, now far removed from that desolate outpost, still believes the curse hasn't finished claiming its debt. He says it waits dormant, beneath the dust and quiet wind, hungry for the next set of boots to disturb its grave. He doesn't believe in ghost stories. He believes in experience, and he believes they weren't alone. War leaves behind more than scars. Sometimes it leaves something buried. And if you listen closely, you'll still hear it breathing, beneath the dust, beneath the silence, waiting for the next soldiers who won't believe the warning until it's far too late. If this story gripped you, creeped you out, or kept you staring at the shadows, don't leave without hitting that subscribe button, because there are more real-life nightmares waiting just beyond the next click. And trust me, you'll want someone to walk into the dark with.